You believe you're looking at the world, that you're perceiving, analyzing, choosing, understanding. But what if what you think you're observing is actually what's observing you? There's a point where the mirror stops being just a reflection and starts becoming consciousness. The world out there is not just being seen by you, it is recording the way you see it, like a secret eye, recording every judgment, every resistance, every silent frequency with which you react to what is. The universe is not passive. It is a living field, intelligent, vibrational, and it doesn't respond to what you say, but to what you are when you observe. There is a subtle illusion, perhaps the most persistent, that we are the only agents of perception, but the field watches back, and it does so without judgment, without haste, without interruption. It simply reflects, in frequency, in archetype. Like a quantum mirror, it imprints your vibration onto the fabric of time. You believe you see reality, but reality is all the while watching how you see it. And when that way is loaded with old memories, unintegrated pain, unconscious self-defense, the field records it all and returns it in the form of experiences, encounters, blocks, and cycles. Nothing outside is testing you. It's only mirroring what you have not yet seen within. This is not an idea to be understood. It is a field to be crossed. Did you still think you were observing? Or are you ready to feel what has always been watching you? There is a scene that silently repeats itself inside you, and it always begins the same way. Something happens. Someone speaks. A situation presents itself, and before you can truly notice, you're already reacting. The mind anticipates, the body tenses, the emotion creeps in, as if there were a hidden script being followed behind your gaze. But that script is not new. It comes from afar. From times when your perception had to defend itself in order to survive. Times when observing was dangerous. So you learned to distort what you saw, so it would hurt less. You learned to filter, to judge, to run, and that became automatic. So automatic that today, when you think you are observing clearly, you are actually just reliving the same old lens, the lens of trauma, the lens of expectation, the lens of what was never digested. That's why even after so many paths walked, so many practices, so many searches, the feeling of repetition still accompanies you, as if life is spinning in circles within the same vibration. It's not the world that doesn't change. It's the way you observe it that still echoes the past. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." But what if what we call fate is not a straight line imposed from the outside, but rather a reflection of the same unchallenged observations? What if what seems to come from outside is actually coming from your own field, the field that memorizes your vibration like a sensitive mirror, the field that does not respond to your conscious intentions, but to what vibrates behind them? The body knows this. It registers what the mind ignores. Sometimes you feel a subtle discomfort in front of something seemingly trivial, a phrase, a look, a random memory, and the response is disproportionate. The heart races, breathing changes, a nameless anguish arises. That's not the now. It's the old observing the present. It's the pattern interfering with reality as if it still needed to protect something that no longer exists. But it does, inside you, because what was not welcomed continues observing for you. You believed you saw the world through your own eyes, but those eyes were shaped by all the times you had to hide what you felt, swallow what hurt, silence what was true. And today, those same memories watch with you. They sit behind your gaze. They interpret everything, and the field responds to them. That's why life seems to repeat the same kinds of situations, people, mismatches, because the vibration that observes has not changed. What is seen repeats, not because you don't deserve something new, but because you haven't yet observed with presence what was observing you. There is deep intelligence in this mirroring. It is not punishing you, it is revealing you, with patience, with symbolic precision, showing in detail what you haven't yet held with awareness. And when you begin to look, not outward, but toward what is looking, something changes. A space opens up. A silent field emerges between what happens and how you react. And it is in that space that reality begins to reorganize. You don't need to force anything, nor understand everything. You just need to hold that space with presence. Reality bends to the observer, but not to the one who observes in haste. Rather, to the one who observes in surrender. The world has always looked at you, but now, maybe it's your turn to look back. Not outward, but to the point within you that still believes it must defend itself in order to exist. Maybe what's creating your reality is not what you want, but what is still watching you from inside, waiting to be acknowledged. The field listens. It always has. And now, it awaits a new observation. There is a layer of reality that only reveals itself when the gaze becomes silent. While the mind runs to understand, explain, or solve, what needs to be seen remains hidden, because what is most true doesn't scream. It whispers, and can only be accessed by those who have grown tired of looking outside for what has always been vibrating within. Have you ever felt that something was watching you when you were completely alone? It wasn't fear. It was presence, an inexplicable feeling that there was more there than just you, your thoughts, and time passing by. It was as if the field itself were witnessing your inner state, waiting for you to notice it too. This is not mystical. It's subtle. We live within a living mesh of consciousness. We don't just observe, we are observed, not with physical eyes, but with vibrational eyes. The universe records states, frequencies, unspoken intentions. It responds to the invisible language we emit when we think no one is watching. But the field sees. It always has. That's why sometimes life responds not with what you desire, but with what you need to integrate. What returns to you is not injustice. It is revelation. Everything that manifests carries a precise vibrational signature of the way you have been looking at life, at others, at yourself. And when the gaze carries judgment, fear, or resistance, the field responds with compatible reflections, not as punishment, but as energetic coherence. Coherence is the language of the universe. The way you observe becomes the way life responds to you. And if you still feel the need to control everything, it's likely that reality is still organizing itself from an inner point that does not feel safe to trust. Control is a disguised request for protection, but all protection closes, and everything that closes blocks the flow of pure observation. To truly observe is to open. It's to see what hurts without running, to notice the old impulse arising, and sustain the new gaze anyway. To hear the mind scream it won't work and still keep the heart present. Because change does not begin in the world. It begins in how you observe what the world shows you. It's an internal gesture, almost imperceptible. But when it happens, everything changes. Not because reality changed, but because the observer changed. And the field then responds with another frequency. You don't need to fix your past, nor understand every trauma. You just need to change how you observe them today. What hasn't been seen with compassion will keep creating barriers, but what is welcomed dissolves, not like magic, but like resonance. Thoth once said, "As it is within, so it is without. As is the observer, so is the reality that bends." But there is an even subtler inversion. What you believe you're seeing outside is what's observing you from within, and that perception changes everything. Because reality starts being seen not as something separate, but as an extension of your state. The other ceases to be a threat, becomes a mirror. The situation ceases to be an obstacle, becomes a message. The pain ceases to be punishment, becomes access. This is the moment when the veil fades, and what once was struggle becomes revelation. You are not being tested. You are being called to see with different eyes, not the eyes of haste, of judgment, of trauma, but the eyes of the awakened heart, the ones that no longer need to understand in order to trust. To observe with awareness is a revolutionary act, because it deactivates the unconscious patterns that feed repetition, because it returns the vibration of presence to the field, because it opens space for the new, and the new only enters when you stop observing with memory and start observing with the now. There is something, right now, observing you, and if you get quiet enough, maybe you'll notice that this something is not outside, it's inside, and it waits for you to recognize it, so it can finally change what you call reality. Have you ever noticed how certain moments seem frozen in time? No matter how many years go by, There's a memory that still pulses when you close your eyes. A word spoken on an ordinary day. A look that cut deeper than it should have. A silence that screamed something that was never said. And even today, these images continue to influence the way you observe everything around you. It's not the memory itself that holds you back. It's the undigested emotion it carries. It's the feeling that it's still happening somewhere inside you. While the mind says, "This is over," the body responds, "Not completely." And the field listens to the body, not the words. This vibrational listening is subtle but decisive, because what you believe you've overcome intellectually may still be operating silently at the frequency level, and what you think you're observing neutrally may still be seen through the filter of old pain. That's why certain cycles seem to return, even when you've already understood, already forgiven, already cleared. Reality does not respond to mental understanding. It responds to the frequency of your observation, and that frequency is shaped by layers beyond thought. It is born from the vibration your field emits when you are simply present with what is. But presence requires surrender, and surrender requires trust. Trusting that you can observe without needing to control, that you can feel without needing to fix, that you can see without needing to judge. This is a vibrational turning point, because when the observer quiets the defense mechanisms, the field changes its response. Reality begins to reorganize not from resistance but from acceptance, and what once seemed like repetition begins to feel like release. But don't expect it to happen grandly. Liberation rarely makes noise. It happens in an almost invisible instant, when you're about to react as always, and instead you choose to just observe. That's where the old pattern loses its power. Not because it was fought, but because it was seen. And what is seen with awareness no longer needs to repeat. Krishnamurti said that to observe without evaluating is the highest form of human intelligence, because in that observation, there is a field of love, an internal space where everything can exist without needing to be fixed. This is the space that heals, not because it has answers, but because it holds the truth without running from it. And when this space opens within you, reality feels it, because it is sensitive to your vibration. And that sensitivity creates synchronicities, unexpected paths, people who arrive with messages that touch exactly where you were already ready to receive. But that only happens when the observer changes, when they stop looking for blame and begin to see patterns, when they stop reacting and begin to hold, when they understand that what the world is showing is exactly what needs to be seen within, not as guilt, but as a mirror. And in that mirror lies the chance to see yourself from a new place, no longer as a victim of events, but as the center of your own vibration. Everything around you responds to that center. And if you keep observing with the eyes of the past, you will continue creating future versions of what already was. But if you allow yourself to observe with neutrality, the field begins to mirror the new. There is no technique more powerful than holding a new state of observation, because it transforms everything without you needing to force anything. Reality does not bend to your will. It bends to your vibration, and that vibration is born from how you look, not outward, but inward. Because deep down, everything that's observing you just wants to be seen too. There is a moment when reality becomes translucent. It's not visible to the eyes, but you can feel it. The surface of events seems to break, and what's behind begins to emerge. Something that was always there, but only now finds space to reveal itself. This space doesn't open outside. It opens in your state of presence. What you called life was actually a continuous projection of internal states that you hadn't yet recognized as creative forces. And while you believed you were observing everything with autonomy, something deeper was observing you. And not just observing, writing your reality based on how you reacted to what you saw. It's subtle, but transformative. Observation is not a one-way act. It's a dance of frequencies. What you observe, observes you back. And it responds not with logic, but with resonance. That's why what you emit in silence has more impact than any spoken intention. The intention that creates is not the one you declare. It's the one you sustain vibrationally when you are alone, when no one is watching, when your field is free from performance. It is in that raw, bare, honest state that reality bends. But this level of surrender is frightening, because it demands you let go of the armor that protected you for so long. It demands you abandon the internal vigilance that always expected the worst, even when everything seemed fine, because part of you still believes that if you don't watch with fear, you'll be caught off guard. And it is precisely that expectation of pain that ends up repeating itself as experience. Not because life wants you to suffer, but because your field still says, "This is what I know." The quantum field is not moral. It is vibrational. It doesn't know what's fair or unfair. It just responds. And it responds to what is present. Not to what you want, but to what you vibrate. That's why transforming reality is an act of refining your own observation, of noticing what still vibrates behind your gestures, words, desires, of facing the part of you that still watches the world with suspicion, expecting attack, or expecting abandonment, or expecting more of the same. As long as that pattern is the observer, nothing truly new can enter. The new doesn't come from outside. It's born from the internal collapse of old points of view. When you can hold a new observation, lighter, quieter, more deprogrammed, the field begins to reorganize everything. Relationships dissolve naturally. Others arise effortlessly. Situations that were once stuck begin to flow. And what once seemed chaotic starts to align. But it's not magic. It's coherence. You begin to be seen by reality based on who you really are, and no longer based on who you thought you needed to be in order to survive. This is the turning point. When you allow what observes to be crossed by who you are now, not by who you were. And this creates a vibrational break from repetition. The old dissolves not because it was rationally overcome, but because it lost the frequency that sustained it. Every pain is sustained by a way of observing. Every healing begins when that way is seen with sincerity. You may, at this moment, be stuck in a reality that no longer matches your soul, and perhaps, even without realizing it, you're still trying to change it through effort, struggle, trying. But reality doesn't change through force. It changes through presence. And presence only arises when you stop resisting what you observe and begin to observe your resistance too, because that's where the old holds on, and that's where the new waits to emerge. Are you still trying to change what you see? Or have you realized that everything observing you is just waiting for a new gaze? There is a moment in the journey when silence becomes more truthful than any explanation. Words no longer reach. Concepts become empty. Certainties dissolve. And all that remains is observation. But not just any kind. It's the kind that remains even when everything seems to fall apart. The one that observes itself. That doesn't try to change what it feels. It simply feels. That doesn't try to understand what happens. It simply allows it to happen. This is the observation that transmutes, because it no longer carries the energy of struggle. It has already gone through the exhaustion of repetition. It has already bowed to the pain of control. It has already emptied itself of wanting to prove something to the world. And now, it just sees. It sees with the eyes of a soul that's tired of resisting. Maybe you are at that point, where everything seems still on the outside, but on the inside there's a whirlwind of perception about to break through. There's no noise in this breakthrough. There is surrender. You realize that reality wasn't against you. It was just staging what you hadn't yet had the courage to fully see. And that hurts. But it also sets you free. Because when the veil of projection dissolves, you find something that was always there, patiently waiting for your presence to become deep enough to see it without masks. That something is you. Not the you that thinks, plans, compares, but the you that simply observes. The silent consciousness that witnesses all your versions and still remains. The pure observer. The point of presence. It is from this point that reality begins to bend in a different way, but it does not appear when you force it. It reveals itself when you let go, not of living, but of controlling. Because as long as you are trying to create a reality that confirms what your mind thinks it needs, the field will still be responding to lack, not to presence. That's why so many awaken in the midst of collapse. When everything falls apart, something inside realigns. And that realignment doesn't come from pain, but from surrender. From the choice to observe even suffering without identifying with it. To notice resistance without becoming resistance. to look at fear without being swallowed by it. This is vibrational maturity, the ability to hold the field without reacting compulsively, to be the space where everything happens without needing to change what happens. And then, the field changes. Because what sustained the old, the unconscious impulse, the silent rejection, the escape disguised as control, stops being fed. What was observing you finds rest. Because now, finally, it has been seen. Every part that screams for repetition is just waiting to be welcomed. Every pain that insists on returning only wants to be observed with love. There is no punishment in this. There is return, and return is the universe's language to remind you of where you drifted away from yourself. When you begin to observe from this new center, memories lose their weight, expectations lose their rigidity, experiences lose their labels, and you begin to feel something that once seemed forgotten. Lightness, not an euphoric lightness, but a dense lightness, grounded, serene. Because now you know, you don't need to understand everything to trust. You don't need certainty to stay. You don't need control to create. Reality does not organize itself according to what you demand, but according to what you emanate. And what you emanate is born from your point of observation. If your gaze carries presence, the field responds with coherence. If your gaze carries the past, the field responds with repetition. It's not punishment, it's a mirror, and this mirror is not outside. It's in everything you experience. Every person who enters, every situation that persists, every emotion that resurfaces, every silence that echoes. Everything is observing you to see if you finally see. And when you do, there's nothing more to do, because the field has already understood. It was just waiting for that new gaze to return what was always yours, but could only arrive when the old observer fell silent. Now, has it fallen silent? Or is it still trying to control what is already trying to heal you? Reality is not a stage where you perform. It is a mirror where you reveal yourself. As long as you try to change the reflection without touching the gaze, everything remains the same. But when the gaze becomes quiet, the reflection transforms. Not because the world changed, but because finally, the one observing it has changed. You are not being tested. You are being reminded that the field listens to what you vibrate in silence and responds with precision. Today, perhaps, something has observed you in return, not with judgment, but with presence. And if that silent gaze touched your field, then something in you has already begun to reorganize. Allow yourself to hold that space, without haste, without escape, without explanation. Transformation does not begin outside. It begins the moment you see what has always been watching you. If this has passed through your field, write in the comments, "Now, I see what was observing me." That way I'll know you stayed until the end.